Alright, I want to show you guys a few things about Linux, and particularly the version we'll be using is Ubuntu, which is just one version of Linux. There are others. So I've got my VM here. This is my virtual machine with Linux Ubuntu running on it. And I'll show you a few things, some of which will just be getting familiar with Linux, and some will be for the lab we're doing. First thing that's important to understand, though, I've got my Linux machine in full screen here. The layout of Ubuntu, it has this toolbar along the top. So because of that, what you probably want to do when you're dealing with Linux is to hide the little VMware toolbar at the top. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to unpin this so that I can see my actual Ubuntu toolbar up here. And to get back to your VM and maybe close it out or whatever, you can always just hover up there and get that to pull back down. But if you unpin it, then you can see everything you need to see for your Ubuntu machine. So first thing I want to show you is kind of how this toolbar behaves. Or notice the layout of the desktop. It's similar to Windows. You've got your desktop with maybe some folders on it. Over here is probably similar to the taskbar at the bottom of Windows. So this has some sort of commonly used shortcuts that you might need to access. So that's over on the left side in Ubuntu. And can't quite see it, but on yours, when you're running yours, let me just get this out of full screen so we can see it for a second. Alright, I usually don't like to run it this way because it's tiny, but at the very top right of your Ubuntu desktop is a little gear, and that's important because that's kind of like your start button in Windows. So if you wanted to shut down or restart or switch user or something like that, notice there's a few little things over there that gear will let you access. So just like in the previous labs when we were working with virtual machines, when you're done reusing your VM, you want to shut it down through the actual guest operating system this way. Alright, so that's through that gear in Ubuntu. So I'm going to go back to full screen here. Alright, I want to show you a couple things about this. I think it's called the launcher. I can't remember exactly, over here on the left side. One is pinning some things to this, or maybe unpinning it. For example, if I didn't use this Amazon thing, which I probably never will, you could always right click on that and unlock from the launcher. So you can sort of add maybe some programs that you want to use to this, or remove some from it as well. That kind of goes hand in hand with the next thing I want to show you, which is how do we find programs on this Linux machine. Best way to do that, and there's more than one way, is to go up to this search feature over here. Right? So I'm going to click search. And of course, unless you know the name of the program, you won't know what to type in for the search. So what I'd recommend, still use this search, but notice down here at the bottom, click on this second one here. Click on that, and it will come up with a list of programs that are on this machine. Mine's running a little slow, but give it a minute and it'll come up with a list. So notice already installed on this Ubuntu version right out of the box are a bunch of programs. There's a text editor, kind of like Notepad, that we might be using. But there are some others here. Notice there's a backup utility. You can got some kind of solitaire game. But when I click this second one down here at the bottom, and this comes up, under installed, I would recommend clicking this little expand thing and see all the programs that are installed. So notice by doing that, now I've got access to a lot more things that are already installed on this machine. So like I said, if you don't know the name of it to search, you could always go here, click that little expand, and then I could get access to the calculator or some other programs that are on here that I may not have known were on here. So that's probably the best way to look for programs and find them in the Ubuntu Linux. Alright, I want to show you one other thing about the taskbar. So I'm going to launch this little text editor thing. I'm going to click that to start it up. So when you do that, it'll start the program. So this is the G editor, the little notepad style text editor in Linux. One thing I want to mention about that though is while this program is running, notice it appears over here in the launcher. And if it's a program you're going to use a lot, what you could do while it's running is right click again over here and lock it to the launcher. That way the next time you want to run this, you don't have to go search or go into that programs area, it'll just be over here on the launcher. But the other thing about this running program that's important to understand, this is kind of like Macintosh if you've ever used one of those, is the file menu for this program is actually up here. So it's not on the sort of the top of the program itself, it's up here on the main thing. So if I wanted to do file new or file save or something like that, notice I can do that from up there at the very top, which is again why we want to hide that VMware thing if we're running our stuff in full screen. Alright, so I'm going to close that program up. Okay, so there's a couple particular things I want to show you for the lab this week, and one is creating users in Ubuntu. It's probably more than one way to do it, but the way I'm going to show you is through this little settings gear thing over here. Alright, so on the launcher, I'm going to click settings, and it's kind of similar to control panel in Windows. There's a bunch of things you can alter about the computer from that settings area. So there's a lot of things you can do from this settings area, and feel free to explore some of them. But I'm going to go into user accounts here and show you how to add a user, and particularly how to add a user with or without a password. So I'm going to double click on user accounts here. And here's where it gets a little tricky. Alright, so here's our user accounts area, and right now I'm just the only user on this machine. And it doesn't have an obvious button, but if I click this plus sign, that's how we're going to add a user. But notice it's grayed out. So whenever you're doing sort of administrative type stuff, such as creating users, first thing we have to do is hit this little unlock button up here. And we're going to have to put in our password. So I'm going to click unlock, put in my Unix password for this Unix VM, and I recommend just making it something very simple and short. I'm going to put that in, and now notice it'll allow me to hit that plus sign to add a user. So I did the unlock. Now to add a user, I'm going to hit plus. Should just have to provide a username and not necessarily a password. So if you want, you could type in a name here. So that'll be kind of the name that gets displayed for the user under full name, and then the username, notice, is just the lowercase version of that. I think if I put last name in here, notice there's no space in the username, which is important. Alright, so when you're doing things with that user later, this will be the important name down here. So I'm just going to leave that as Jimmy. And we're going to leave it as standard for the purposes of the lab. I'm just going to have you create a standard user. But here's the other tricky thing about when you create a user. We got this username Jimmy, but his account is disabled. It says password, it says account disabled. So the next thing we really need to do is click that where it says disabled, and it should bring up a dialog. Alright, so I think the only way to get that dialog to come up is to click over here at the edge of where it says account disabled. And if you wanted to set a password, this is where you would do it. So if you wanted to create a user with a password, you could do it here. Or to just enable this account, I think we just click this drop down and do enable account. Sorry about that, it's not enable account. Click the drop down and do login without a password. And hit change. And now the thing, this person's account is now enabled and doesn't necessarily have a password. Otherwise, it would not be enabled. So that's creating a simple standard user and sort of enabling the account. One last thing I want to show you is the Unix file structure, which is a little bit different than Windows. So it's important to kind of get a handle on that or understand it. So this is kind of like the File Explorer in Windows. Over here on the launcher there's something called Files. So this is how you would browse your C drive and all that in Ubuntu. So I'm going to click that. And I'm going to show you a couple things about the file structure that's different. Alright, so one thing I'm going to do is this open in like a full screen mode, so I'm going to go up here to the top and click on this button, whatever that button is, to make it so that it's a little smaller and easier to manage, because I want to show you some of the things over here. It takes you to kind of a favorites area, but keep in mind to get to sort of the C drive, as it were, go over here and click on Home. Sorry, click on this Other Locations. Alright, so I'm going to click the little plus sign, go to Other Locations, and this will take you to the computer. So if I click on that, I should see kind of what's called the root, which is the equivalent of the C drive in Windows. So in Unix it's called the root. So notice up here there's a /. That means we're kind of at the C drive or at the root in Unix. From there you can drill down into folders. So all these are kind of on the root drive. And then for example, if I go into the Etsy folder, I can double click that. And it should have subfolders of its own. So notice now the location is etc. The other thing I want to show you for the purposes of the lab are the different views. So this is kind of the main view with the larger icons that we're used to. But if we go up to one of these buttons, it's a way to see some different views. So to go to the other view, we're going to click this second button here. And notice there's two main views. There's kind of one that we're looking at, which is kind of the large icons, and then if we click this other one, it's kind of like the details view. So we can see things like the size of this folder, last time it was modified, things like that. And again, like Windows, we could sort by this. So if we were looking for the largest things on the root, we could click here to sort by size and maybe click again. So notice this one has the most items, and then it goes down from there. So that's just kind of some ways to navigate around, look at the different views, and find your way around the Linux folder structure.